When you look into the Bible, what you will find all throughout the Bible are people praying to God. For thousands of years, many people have prayed to God. God's people have always been prayerful people. I think we know as Christians that we should be prayerful people. I think we know that we ought to be communicating with God often through prayer. It is our lifeline, right? It's how we talk with God. It's how we communicate with God. I think we know that it's something that we should be doing to foster a healthy relationship with Him, and that, we can pray to God all the time. All the time. That door is always open for a child of God to approach Him and talk with Him. And I know many of us do. However, I do believe that there's something to be said about purposefully leaving, purposely withdrawing, and going to a specific place to be with God alone in prayer. Somewhere where you can get away from the distractions, somewhere where you can get away from people even. You can get away from the busyness of life and just be with God alone. Excuse me. If you want to open your Bibles to Mark chapter 1, that's where we're primarily going to be this morning. Mark chapter 1. In that chapter, Mark 1, we read a little bit about the ministry of Jesus and the things that He was doing. Jesus was, as we know, was a very busy man. He was a man on a mission, you could say. There were things that He was doing. There were things that he had to get done, all the while trying to do those things very discreetly because He did not want things to get too big, too fast. Maybe you've heard of what is called the Messianic secret. That would be part of that. But we also see in chapter 1 of Mark's Gospel that Jesus makes it a priority to go and be alone with God in prayer, hence the title of the sermon. There are several reasons that we find in Mark 1 as to why Jesus is going to be alone with God, and so I want to just highlight those and look at those as examples for us that we can take from and talk about why. Why is Jesus going to be with God? What are the reasons for that we see? But also talk about when, right? When did Jesus do this? How did Jesus do this? And where did Jesus do this? But the point of the lesson really, and what I want to make sure that I get across, is this right here. Be with God alone. All right? If you had a thesis for the sermon, that right there is what it would be. Be with God alone. That's the main message. If you get anything out of this morning, sometimes you just need to be with God alone. Okay? Our thoughts really this morning, though, and we'll get down to it, but they're really kind of springboarding off of Mark chapter 1, verse 35, which says, "In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there." Okay? And that's really where the primary focus is going to be. But before we get to that, there are some things that I would like for us to discuss before we get there. It's not uncommon that we see Jesus doing this throughout the Gospels. There are several instances where we actually see Jesus leaving to go and pray somewhere else, okay? One of those instances is in this one here, Mark 1:35. You see another one in Luke 5:16. Jesus Himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. Chapter 6 of Luke, He went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer. That would be before choosing the apostles. Before we read about Him walking on the water in Matthew 14, He sent the disciples ahead of Him and sent the crowds away. And He went up on the mountain by Himself to pray, and when it was evening, He was there alone. When Jesus, of course, is in the garden, before they came to take him, in Matthew 26:36, it says that he told them to sit here while I go over there. Okay? And we see that. But it's what we see Jesus doing often. And now I know that we can pray to God anytime, anywhere, right? Jesus could have too. But there's something special, there's something intimate, there's something about separating yourself and withdrawing yourself from your normal everyday routine and the hustle and bustle of life, finding a quiet space to where you can have quiet time with God. There's just something about it. But I think when we're answering the question why, there are things that we see, okay, prior to Mark 1, verse 35. But there's also things that we see after verse 35 also that might give us some insight as to why he left and went to pray. And Mark records him doing this, and he puts it in between those things, okay, which is interesting maybe. But after verse 35, what we read is that Jesus is going to go throughout Galilee. He's going to preach and teach. He's going to cast out more demons. There's a leper that's cleansed. And then on into chapter 2, he heals a paralytic. That's all after verse 35. Before verse 35, this is what we see. Okay, temptation for 40 days. He's working, he's teaching, he's preaching. We see him making decisions, so he's calling his first disciples. He's going to tell them about what he can make them. We see Jesus teaching in the synagogue and healing a man with an unclean spirit. Simon's mother-in-law is then healed. After that, people began to bring to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. And verse 33 says, the whole city had gathered at the door. So you see the swelling of the crowds, okay, that Mark highlights. And verse 34, it says he healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out many demons, okay? So that, and then we have verse 35, okay, that talks about him leaving and going to pray. I think you see several things prior to verse 35 that probably would have contributed to him going and praying. Now, I believe that we would be safe in saying that Jesus probably was praying like within all of that. I don't think it would make sense to say that, Jesus went and prayed after all of those things. Or it wasn't until after all of those things that you read before verse 35 and then he went and prayed. I know the text doesn't say it, but I would think that we would probably be safe in, at least concluding that maybe he did. But when we look at all of that, down through chapter 1 and even a little bit into chapter 2, I see a lot of reasons in there as to why Jesus would need to go and be alone with God in prayer. I see a lot of reasons in there why we would need to go and be alone with God in prayer. And that's really what I want to draw from today. I want to look at some of those examples, if you will, and see maybe what we can apply and take from those. All right? And primarily before verse 35. One reason as to why we might need to go and be with God alone is when we're dealing with temptations. When we're dealing with temptations. I can't imagine what it must have been like to go head-to-head with the adversary, the deceiver, the father of lies for 40 straight days in the wilderness. 40 straight days, especially when you are fasting that whole time yourself. Right? I can't imagine what that would be like and how taxing that would have been, both mentally and physically. But I do know that when temptations come, when they come along, that's a good time to go and be alone with God. Living in a world, living as a Christian in this world is not easy. Living in a world that is full of so many temptations, that maybe you used to be engaged in is not easy. And a lot of times those temptations never go away. They just don't. Okay? And so we are left then to deal with them, right? We wrestle with them. We struggle with them. Sometimes we even give in to those temptations, and they can really weigh us down a lot of times. And really everybody struggles. I think we know that. Everybody has temptations that they struggle with. You know, not everybody is exempt from these things. In fact, nobody is exempt from temptations. So, you know, if life is hitting you, right? If life is hitting you, if temptations are being thrown or hurled at you, right? Or you're just trying to make it, really. Sometimes it's good to just step away for a little bit and be with God alone. Okay? Sometimes those things are hard to deal with. They are hard to reason with, and it's a struggle. And so sometimes we need to be with God alone, and that would, somewhere where you can pour out the struggles, right? You can pour them out and let it all out with God and talk to Him about the burdens that you're carrying and pray to Him to help you be stronger and how to deal with those temptations. God, give me the capacity to deal with this stuff that I'm working through. You need that. It's healthy to do that. You need to be alone with God and do that. All right? We struggle too much. The struggles are too real, so to speak to all of you down here in the youth section. The struggle is too real, right? To not go and be alone with God in prayer. And so we need it. You need that. And I believe spending some alone time with God as you deal with the pressures of life is necessary for a Christian. It's absolutely imperative for a Christian that you do this because you need it. Okay? What's another reason? Okay? We see Jesus choosing some of the first apostles, and that's not an easy decision. And so I believe another reason as to why we might need to be alone with God is when there are big decisions to make. When there are big decisions to make. We make decisions every day. Right? Most of those decisions that we make are very minor. What shirt am I wearing today? What am I going to eat for lunch? Right? Very minor, very trivial most of the time. We make a lot of decisions most of the time that require very little thinking of us at all, hardly any. Right? But sometimes we're faced with decisions that could alter the course of your life. We're faced with decisions that could have a severe and heavy impact even on your family, either positively or negatively. Sometimes we're faced with those decisions. Okay? Sometimes we've got a big decision to make, maybe with moving locations. Maybe sometimes we have decisions to make on whether this job is going to be good for this. Is it not going to be good? Right? Sometimes we have hard decisions that we have to make even with our own family sometimes. What if someone is sick in the family? Right? And maybe all of that has been laid upon your shoulders, and now you're the caretaker, and you're the one that has to deal with all of the medical decisions that are going to need to be made, and that's on you now. What if you have to move them? What if they can't live on their own anymore? And you've got to move them? You've got to make all of these arrangements? You've got to be the one to say, yes, they can do this. No, they can't take this or do... All of that is going to fall on you. It's times like that. It's times like that. It's big decisions in life that you have to make to where you need to go be with God alone. You need to withdraw sometimes. You need to find somewhere and talk to God about those things. Now look, I'm not asking for a show of hands, okay? But just for you to think about, really, when is the last time that you have gone to be alone with God the Father in prayer, and not just once, numerous times in prayer to God before you made a big decision with your life? Or a big decision where you were going to be the one to have to make it? When's the last time you've done that? When's the last time you've gone to God because of a huge decision that was about to have to be made? Jesus made that a priority when there were big things that he knew were coming. You know, when there were tough decisions that he would have to make. You can find Jesus in prayer to God before those things, before he made them. And we need to make that a practice as well for our lives. All right? That communication is vital. Okay? It's especially when big decisions have to be made. You know, why would we not seek God's counsel in that? Why would we not go to the one that is bigger than us to help us make decisions that are bigger than us in life? Why would we not do that? We need to go to him, and God wants us to go to him as his children. I know sometimes we think that we can just pull ourselves by the bootstraps and I can do it. I can handle this. Let me tell you something. Sometimes you can't handle it. And sometimes you need to let God handle it for you. You know? Stop being so prideful sometimes. Just let's give it over to him. Let's let him help. The one that spoke the universe into existence. You don't think that he can help you make the decisions that you're faced with? Yeah. I think he can. I think he's well capable of doing it. Thirdly, as to why we might need to be with God alone when the work is heavy. For a lot of us, we're just trying to keep our heads above water, right? It's a struggle enough sometimes, but we are also very busy today, and it causes a lot of stress, okay? It does. And maybe you're a person that wears a lot of hats, okay, so to speak. Maybe there's a lot of people that count on you for various things, and you have a lot of people coming to you on a weekly basis, right? And you not only have your job that you need to handle, but people are seeking things from you also, okay? I had to bother a guy this week, and he's one of the busiest guys I know. I definitely didn't want to do that, but I had to. He was the guy to call, you know. But this is a guy that already wears a lot of hats, and I just, didn't feel right calling the guy. But there are people that do a lot of things, and they do wear a lot of hats. Maybe you're a person that people seek because of your wisdom or expertise on something, right? And they want your advice. They want your input. You have obviously proven yourself with what you have done, and people are going to you, right? Isn't that what you want in a way? Right, let's go to the guy that knows or the woman that knows. Maybe that's not you, right? Maybe you're not really one that wears a lot of hats or something, but maybe there's even just, at work, there's deadlines to meet or something like that. Or the work that you're involved with is very stressful. Maybe you own a business or something, and there's all the stress from that, right? That's on top of your personal life. Okay, all of that is on top of your personal life. If you have a family, you have responsibilities there. If a father, a husband, a mother, a wife. Okay, you have responsibilities to one another. You have responsibilities for your children, your whole family. That's a lot. Oh, and not to mention the responsibilities that you may have with your church family. Now that gets to be a lot. Work, family, church, that can weigh on people, right? There's all kinds of responsibilities, and so the work can just get so heavy. It can get very heavy sometimes. It can bog you down, right? And, how are you doing with all of that? Really, how are you doing with all of that? How are you working through those things? Are you talking to God through that at all? Are you talking to God while you carry such a heavy load? You know, Jesus was extremely busy with his ministry. There were people to heal. There were demons to be cast out. There was preaching and teaching to be done. There were people always coming to him and always challenging him. Yet, Jesus found time to be with God alone. And I think that's the key. You know, we need to carve out time in our busy lives and make time for God. We need to let God really be the source, right? The source that allows us to keep going in our busy lives. And when the work gets heavy, we need to unplug from the world and plug into God. And you know, it's easy to make an excuse. And sometimes you ask someone if they've prayed lately, and they say, well, no, I haven't. I've just been so busy. I just haven't found the time to. Listen, Jesus made time to go and be with God alone in prayer. And there really is no excuse for a Christian to not be communicating with God in prayer. It's got to be a priority. Look, it's part of who we are. It's part of who you are as a Christian. Now, really, I guess the second half of this lesson is looking some more at more of the practical things in all of this, okay, about being alone with God. And it's all from verse 35. Really, again, there's what it says. So when we talk about when to be with God alone, it says Jesus did it early in the morning while it was still dark. Okay, now, maybe that scares you to read that. But I understand not all of us are early risers, okay? Not all of us are going to have our alone time with God in the morning when it's still dark outside. You may be on a different schedule, but in the morning, that is a good time to do that, because it's really before your day gets going. It's before your day gets started, right? Now, that would take some discipline, obviously, to try to get into that routine, but it's a good example, okay? But before the day got going, Jesus was spending time with God, okay? While it was still dark, while people are still asleep, and it's before everything gets going for the day. And mind you, this is after a late night of healing a bunch of people and casting out demons, and so he definitely didn't let a late night stop him from being in communication with God, and maybe there's a lesson in that right there. Excuse me. But he's doing it early in the morning. Why? Well, it's quiet. People aren't going to bother him, and he can quietly be with God alone. A guy told me recently that sometimes we need to learn the discipline of quietness and just be with God. And so that's when he did it, okay? And maybe you can make that your time as well in the morning. But what about how he did it, okay? What about how? Well, the text says he got up and he left. He got up and he left. It says he departed. He went to go be somewhere else, okay? Why would he do that? Well, to get away from people, to get away from the distractions, to get away from the things that might not allow him to focus on God like he wants to. Whoa. Okay, and sometimes you just need to get away. Leave, get out of the house. Whatever you need to do, right? I can remember I was talking with a young man that was going through Bear Valley, and I would check in on him from time to time. And one time I did, and he said, man, I'm just really struggling. I mean, he was really just having a time, right, going through that. He was having just struggles with his studies and even his health a little bit. And I actually did find the message that I sent to him. It's been several months ago, but I found the message, and I told him, I said this. I said, get out of the house if you can. Go walk a trail if you need to, and be alone with God for a bit and clear your head. And I said, even Jesus went to the mountains alone to pray. Bear Valley's in the mountains. It's in Denver, so hence the trail. Go walk a trail. That's what I told him. But you see, we need that sometimes, right? Sometimes we just need to leave. And I'm not saying abandon your responsibilities. Please don't misunderstand me. Do not walk out on your responsibilities that you have, okay? But when you have time, at least, try to go somewhere and be with God. Get out of the mess for a minute and go have some quiet time with God, which leads us to where? Okay, where to go and be with God alone? It says Jesus went to a secluded place. ESV is going to read desolate place. New King James is going to read a solitary place. I think you get the idea. He left to go be somewhere else where people weren't, right? That's the idea. He went to a place where nobody else was going to be. And look, we need to find our secluded place. You need to find your secluded place. I don't know where that is for you, right? I don't know if that's a specific room in your house. I don't know if that's on the back porch early in the morning or sitting down early in the wee hours of the morning at the table with a cup of coffee. I don't know. Okay, maybe that's 15 miles away for you. But wherever and whatever that place is, let that be your secluded place, your desolate place, your solitary place, to where you can be by yourself and be with God alone. It's just you and God. It's just you two. And look, I know it's hard sometimes to leave. I get it. I know that some people are in situations that, leaving really isn't an option, right? And sometimes there are things that you just can't leave unattended. I get that. If possible, maybe just reach out to somebody and ask them, look, can you fill in for a little bit? I just need to go and be alone. I need to go and be alone with God for a little while. And hopefully that would be possible, and they could allow you to do that. Hopefully whoever that is can understand that and give you that. Okay? But I would also say, this secluded place, wherever that is, don't make it a place where people are going to be able to easily distract you, or make that a place where you yourself are going to be easily distracted. Right? If there's a lot of traffic and there's people coming in and out all the time, I wouldn't pick that place to have your alone time with God. Okay? It's going to be distracting for you. Okay? Try to pick a place where you're not going to be bothered for a while, so that you can have clear thoughts as you communicate with God. And so maybe you can think about that this week, right? Where is your secluded place? Where is that for you? Actually, it's interesting that word, secluded place, it's the same word that we see up in the context for that word wilderness. It's the same word, actually. Where's your wilderness? For some of you, that's the actual wilderness. I get that. Got a lot of people that hunt in here, right? Cool. Let that be your place for a little while. But if you don't have that place, find one. Find one. Find a secluded place to be with God alone. Maybe that's just in your car. I don't know. But it's good to have one. I do want to say again that we should be praying to God at all times. We certainly do not need to wait until big things come up or until there are big decisions that we have to make, and then we're going to God in prayer. No, that's not it. We need to be in prayer to God all the time. Okay? We don't want to turn God into this emergency God, right? To where, when big things are coming up, now I'm going to call out to you. No. Don't do that. Don't treat God that way. Okay? Don't turn him into an emergency God. But we ought to have prayer as a practice all the time. But sometimes in life hits us with really challenging things, big things, trials, temptations. It hits us with stuff where we really need to go and be alone with him. And I think we see that example when we look at what Jesus did during his ministry. There were times where where he completely withdrew from everything. Right? He completely left so he could go and pray and be with God alone. That's not a bad example for us to follow. Okay? Look, if you need anything at all this morning, prayers or whatever it is, Jesus invites you to come this morning as we stand and as we sing. Thank you.